We need to work this out.
And the title of my message today is Just One. Just One. Just One. I wonder if it's just me, but how many of you have this thing where it's difficult for you to nail down your favorite of something, right? Like if somebody pins you down and is just like, what is your favorite, like fill in the blank? How many of you have a miniature panic attack? Is it just me? It's so hard for me to try and figure out, like when someone asks, like, what is your favorite movie of all time? Like, I'm like, where do I even start? Okay, there's a bunch, like what category? Are we talking on a, like if I'm going on a trip? Okay, there's certain things of like, what kind of mood am I in? Like a date movie? Or is this like an action film? Or is this like kid friendly? Okay, because there's different categories. I don't know, like if I'm feeling down, like a movie that lifts me up. Are we talking about a comedy? Like what, there's just so many different, do you do this thing when people try and pin you down on what your favorite of something is? Do you try and talk them out of it just being one? You're like, what if I'll give you 5. I'll give you 5 things, 10, top 20. I'm gonna give you my top 20. And they're like, what, just one? I'm like, I can't do just one. I can't do one. It's too much. It's too much pressure, right? This is like this in so many different categories for me. Like, name one, just your favorite album. I'm like, well, what kind of, for what purpose? You know what I mean? Am I like trying to be introspective? Am I trying to like get a workout going, right? Like what am I doing with this album? Is that a worship albums? Are we talking about like romantic? Like what? I can't narrow it down, right? And this happens to me across the board, okay? And maybe this happens to you too. If people are like, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite dessert? Who's your favorite kid? It's just so hard to like, just pick one, But sometimes you have to, right? And I think, what's harder is when people will, and sometimes they'll do this in conversation, they'll add to the phrase this elaborate scenario that makes it feel like this is the last thing you're ever going to choose and you're going to be stuck with it forever, of like, imagine that you are going to go down in a plane crash and you are going to end up stranded on a deserted island, and this is the only kind of ice cream you're going to be able to have for the rest of your life, and that's it, just this one flavor. What do you choose? And I mean, first of all, I'm like, there's so many holes in this plot. Like, what is, it's even more frustrating when a stewardess on a flight you just boarded is asking you this. Now, let's say hypothetically a plane goes down. Like, let's say the pilot's drunk. Like a plane just like this one. I'm like, whoa, I don't want to be on this anymore. Also, how are we keeping the ice cream cold on the island, right? Like, can we channel that energy into like a boat that gets us away? But I don't like the idea of just one thing. I mean, like, what if my taste changed? Like, I like a couple different things, but it's like, what kind of mood am I in? What did I eat just before? You know what I mean? Like, maybe I really like coconut ice cream, but what if there's just a lot of coconuts on the island? It's just like, I need more information to be able to like narrow down the thing. Like, I don't like being told just one, right? Just one. And, I think it's hard to, answer these sorts of questions, because how do you decide in life, like what is most important, what's the best, what's the most significant? And if we're honest, most of us struggle, to rank ice cream flavors in Beyonce albums. Like, so how in the world are we gonna, supposed to deal with substantial stuff? How do we put that sort of stuff in order? I think leading up to the Super Bowl, you hear a lot of talk around, from sports commentators around this idea of legacy, right? The legacy of specific players, of coaches, of teams, of franchises. And what they're talking about is, what is the one thing that these people are going to be known for? right? And there's all this pressure put on it. Like there's all this speculation of like, what's their legacy gonna be? And that's such an intimidating thought, that your life could be distilled down into just one thing. And I wonder if you've ever thought about, what the answers to questions like that would be for you. Like, what's the one thing you want to be known for? Like, if you had to pick one thing, what would it be? Like, what do you hope is the first thing people think of when they think of you? And really, both these questions are just another way of asking the question of, like, what is your life ultimately about? You ever thought, these are just some casual questions to think about on Super Bowl Sunday, just between commercials or whatever, but I wonder if you've ever kind of spent some time thinking about these, because if you could answer these big questions, their answers would help you answer all the small questions in life, and there's a lot. If you knew what your life was about, what's most important to you, the kind of person you want to be, it's easier to know the kinds of things you should focus on, or the kinds of things that maybe you should filter out. If you knew the answers to these big sorts of questions, you could ultimately begin to ask yourself, like, okay, so is this right here, this way of thinking and talking and treating people and spending my time and energy and money, is it actually getting me where I ultimately want to go? And sometimes we live these lives that are very disconnected. Like, we disconnect like what we're actually doing right now with who we ultimately want to be in the course of our life. And yet one determines the other. Then again, if you were to answer these questions and you were to get them right, that's great. If you were to answer them incorrectly, that's horrible, right? Like, if you were to answer these questions and then point your entire life in that direction, and then you get to that place and you realize, like, I answered this wrong, right? Then you have pushed your entire existence, everything you have been and done, in the wrong direction. And you probably figured it out when it's a little bit too late. And that's a horrifying thought, right? That's a lot of pressure to put on these very heavy questions. I think a lot of times for us, getting these questions right, that we all eventually wrestle with and think about, it can be so intimidating that we just decide we're going to ignore it altogether. We're like, I can't deal with that right now. I don't even know. There's so much pressure. And so we just try not to think about it. We live in denial, right? We distract ourselves in a million different ways to not have to face these questions. We do whatever kind of just feels good or seems good in the moment. And I think for a lot of us, we end up living impulsively without much intentionality because we're not quite sure where to aim our intentions. And maybe you have found yourself doing this in life, where you get to the end of a season, or you just look at a set of activities, and you're just like, what is this really, what are we doing here? Where's all this going? What is this about? Is this even who I want to be? Is this even what I want to be? I'm just doing stuff. And we're not the first people to wrestle with this. Like, people have had a hard time answering these big sorts of questions ever since these questions became questions, right? Like, they've been difficult. And in fact, these questions are brought and put in front of all of the greatest teachers throughout human history. And Jesus is approached with this same set of questions. And how he answers them, I think, is so interesting. And that really is going to be the subject of this series, and especially today's introductory message. And this is found in Matthew chapter 22, verse 36, starting in verse 36, where there's this huge crowd of people around Jesus, and just like us, they're humans. They live in a different time, in a different place, in a different culture, but they still have the same sorts of questions rattling around inside of their minds, wondering if their actions are amounting to much of anything. And they ask Jesus this question. Somebody raises their hand, and verse 36 says, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Which is, in their cultural context, the same thing as asking, like, what is the meaning of life? Like, what is life about? Like, what is this whole thing pointed towards? Like, what if I could only, just one thing, If I had to narrow down to just one thing, what is that thing? And Jesus replies in verse 37, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. If you were to distill it down into just one thing, it's love. In other words, what Jesus is saying is love is the meaning of life. Love is the meaning of life. And every single Christian teacher echoes this same idea. In fact, this guy Paul, who ends up writing most of the New Testament, writes a letter to one of the very first Christian churches in this city called Corinth, and he cleverly names the book Corinthians. And it's full of these people who are struggling like we do to define faith. Like, what is it about? Like, to summarize the meaning of life, to understand where to point their existence. And he writes to them and he says this. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 31, he says, let me show you a way of life that is best of all. Like, if I had to narrow it down to just one best way to live, here's what's most important. And then he starts chapter 13. It's a cliffhanger, okay, right? He says, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but I didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Some of you are like, that sounds annoying. Yes, it would be, right? If I had the gift of prophecy, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. I think I skipped a part there. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, then I would be nothing. And that's a lot more stuff than I said originally, you guys. It's a lot of nothingness. Okay. Verse 3, he says, if I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Then he gives a description as to what love is, which we're going to dive into in the next 3 weeks. And then he summarizes the whole thing at the end of the chapter, verse 13, by saying this. 3 things will last forever. I love this because at the beginning he's like, let me just narrow it down to one thing. And then he does the same thing we do. Okay, I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to change. I'm going to give you 3, right? It's very human, right? 3 things will last forever. Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these, okay, if I really had to just pick one, the greatest of these is love. And essentially what he's saying is this. Anything minus love equals nothing. Anything minus love equals nothing. And it's a profound statement, but notice everything he puts in the anything category, okay? If you just look at these 3 verses that he talks about in the beginning of chapter 13, he groups all of the things that we normally aim our lives at, especially in our culture, that we think if I made my life about these things, I would truly be fulfilled, I would truly be happy, my life would really mean something. And this is the way that he organizes it. He starts talking about achievement, right? Man, if I could do this, and that's what achievement is. It's what you do. Man, if I could achieve all of this stuff, if I could just accomplish this, if I could just make this thing happen, man, then my life would really mean something. Then he talks about acknowledgement or reputation, right? Like what people think I am, who people think I am. Man, if people could just have this picture of me that I'm like this, if I could just represent my life to the world, if when people thought about me, they thought about me in this way, and I could control what that looks like, and I could have people really acknowledge and admire me, then my life would really mean something. And then acquirement. Some of you are like, I didn't even know that was a word. You could put mint on the end of that? You can. Look it up, it's real, okay? And that's what you have, right? Like if I could just get if I could have so much that I could give a bunch away and not even feel it, right? I'd be so generous if I had a ton more just to keep. If I could get this and I could get that and I could live here, like if I could achieve and just get acknowledged and just acquire, then man, I would have it made. And he's just saying like, yeah, but the reality is any of those things minus love equals nothing. And the point he's trying to make is you can fill your life with all kinds of things, but without love, you're going to feel empty. Like life isn't going to mean much, because the true measure of our lives will be how much or how little we love. And you already know this. You already know this. How many times have you sat with someone in the wake of a tragedy? Or have you attended a funeral? Or have you read a Facebook post of somebody who's experienced a loss that you can't even imagine the weight of? And what they were trying to communicate to you was, anything minus love equals nothing. Have you ever talked to somebody in the true pain of loss? Somebody who has the exact reputation you're trying to achieve, who has acquired what you think it would cost to just like have it made, who has achieved like everything that you're setting out in your life to achieve. In a moment where they're really thinking about what matters most in their life, they will tell you anything minus love equals nothing. A couple weeks ago, I sat in a hospital room with my sister who lost her son in a car accident. And she grabbed my hand and she's looking at me and she's crying and she was like, I lost my baby. She kept repeating that over and over again in the shock of the moment. And then she squeezed my hand and she says, make sure your kids know you love them. Soak up every moment you get. Do whatever it takes. Exhaust yourself loving them. Spend so much time it feels ridiculous. And you've probably sat with someone that said something similar to you. What are people saying in these moments? They're saying like, make sure the people in your life know you love them. Like, make it obvious, do it often, put your love on display, because without it, everything else is meaningless. It's nothingness, it's emptiness. And it's one thing to say that the meaning of life is love, and to really believe that that's true, but that begs a bigger question, which is, what is love? Like, what are we talking about? Because we use that word a lot. We love all sorts of things. We love salted caramel, okay? We love Disneyland. We love navy blue sometimes, in the right patterns. We love vacations involving beaches. We love songs with DJ Khaled, announcing that he's DJ Khaled, which is every song with DJ Khaled, right? So what is love really? Like, what is real love? What does that look like? And what is fascinating is every writer in the New Testament comes to the same consensus, and it's this, that God is love and Jesus is God. And so if you want to know what love looks like, look at Jesus. And what's interesting about this is that when they say this, and they say it in many different forms in many different places, they're not pointing to the things that Jesus said, although he said a lot of incredible things. He's the most quoted person on the planet. But they're not pointing to what he said. They're pointing to what he did, his actions, how he lived, how he treated people. In fact, people only believe in what Jesus said because of what Jesus did. Paul says it this way elsewhere in the New Testament. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. He says, God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And what he's saying here is that of all the things we could say about love, first and foremost, like, love is a demonstration. It is something you do, not something you feel. People didn't believe Jesus loved them because he told them. They believed he loved them because he showed them. And I will tell you, the same is true of the people in your life. The people in your life will not believe you love them because you tell them. They will believe you love them because you show them. Because love is a demonstration. And you already know this, right? You learned this in kindergarten. Somebody at some point when you were a kid told you, actions speak louder than words. You guys all went to kindergarten. That's awesome. Congratulations. We all know this stuff, right? Actions speak louder than words. Like what you do is more important than what you say or feel. And that's an important thing to remind yourself of in a highly sensitive feeling culture. That what you do is more important than what you say or feel. Think about your life. The people that you're most convinced really love you, how do you know that's true? Because they make it obvious in the way that they treat you, right? If I went around the room and asked you, like, who do you believe more than anyone else in the world really, truly loves you? You would tell me a story about something or several somethings that someone did to prove to you that they loved you. You'd tell me a story, not about feelings, you'd tell me a story about actions. You wouldn't tell me a story about like a beautiful speech someone gave unless that speech just put words to actions that already existed. In fact, if what someone says and what someone does don't seem to match, which do you tend to believe? What they do, right? In fact, what I would tell you is true about your life, and we believe this about other people, but we don't often want to believe it about ourselves, is that the people closest to you are too busy watching what you're doing to hear what you're saying. And how many times have we tried to sit someone down and convince them that we are or think or feel a certain way, and they're like, yeah, sure, prove it. Why would they think that way? Because you think that way. Because we all think that way. Because inside of ourselves, we all intuitively understand that love is a demonstration. You know what else this Romans passage is telling us about love? It's telling us that you don't have to get love from someone to give love to that someone. Right? God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. When did Christ demonstrate love the loudest? While we were still sinners. And who were we sinning against? Him. And how did he demonstrate this love? By dying on a cross. It wasn't something that he said that convinced us. It was something that he did. And can I just tell you, he didn't feel like it. Now that may seem obvious to you. I just wanted to state it. Like, you don't feel your way onto a cross, right? You don't get to a point where you're just like, I don't know, I was just feeling a little crossy today. Let's just do it. It's like, it's not the way it works. How do you end up in that position? You decide ahead of time that if and when it comes to that, you already know what this relationship is worth. And if you are Jesus, the relationship that you have with him is worth everything. I wonder if you've noticed, like me, that it is way easier to love when there's no cross involved. And what is a cross? Metaphorically, a cross is an impasse in which the way someone needs to receive love from you requires you to do something you don't want to do. A cross is an impasse in which the way someone needs to receive love from you requires you to do something you don't want to do. Which is why, love is so much easier until you get to the cross, right? I've loved so many people pre-cross. Right? Have you? Right? We're just like, I love them so much. Oh, yeah, totally. Who? Oh, I love them, right? And then you get up to something where they need to receive something from you that you don't want to do, and you're like, well, it's not love. I don't know. People say that, it's like, maybe this isn't real love that I'm feeling because I don't really want to get up on that cross right now. And I'll tell you, any relationship that goes the distance will eventually end at a cross. And you can either stop there or you can move through it to what's next. And it's not that what existed before wasn't love, but it's so much louder on the other side. And I'll tell you, if you have been in love or if you have loved someone for a long period of time, you know these moments. There are times where what the other person needs from you is to hear something from you that you don't want to say. And you ever been in a conversation with someone where you know what they need to hear and you know what they want you to say and you just don't want to give them the pleasure? And so you talk for an hour and then you're like, and so that's the thing, And they're like, what? And you're like, I said what you know what? I'm leaving, right? It's like, you don't want to do it. You can't bring yourself to do it because you don't want to swallow your pride. You don't want to have to put it into words. You don't want to have to take the time to figure out how to say the thing that you feel or to actually confess the thing that they need to hear. Maybe for you, the cross looks like, they want you to do something to serve them, and you're just like, I don't want to do that thing. I would never choose to do that. And they're like, right, but you chose me. And so this is something that I need from you, or I need you to help me with this, or I need you to shoulder this responsibility. And you're just like, I hate that. And they're like, right, but you love me. And suddenly there's a cross in between you and the future of your relationship. Maybe it's something that they need something from you. They need you to take time to think about them and to gift them something that is particularly meaningful to them. And you're just like, that takes so much time. Can we just do a gift card? Why do I have to do the whole thing? You just get what you, and it's that's not, and it's hard for you. It's difficult. You don't want to have to do that. Maybe it's they want to touch and snuggle. And you're like, can we just get out of my bubble, right? Can we love each other but from a distance? Maybe for them it's I want you to come and do this thing with me and just be next to me while I do this thing. And you're like, how long is the thing? 5 hours. You want me to sit? You're doing a thing and I'm not doing anything. I'm watching you do a thing that you like to do. I don't want to do that. And they're like, well, that's how I'll know that you love me, right? How much time have I spent watching my boys play a video game that I'm not involved in? And then afterwards, they're just like, Dad, I love you so much. And what they're saying is, I feel like you love me so much. You see, Jesus loved people before the cross, but he loved loudest on the cross. And the same will be true of every relationship you have. You may love them before the cross, but your love will ring the loudest on the cross. If people in your life at the end of your life have to point to moments in which your love meant the most, they're going to point to a cross. I think what's even more impressive is that Jesus doesn't treat the people who put him on the cross as if it were an imposition, which blows my mind, because that is definitely what I'm trying to do, right? If I was on the cross, it wouldn't look like, Father, forgive them, for they don't, right? That's not what I would have been. I would have been like, you see what I'm doing for you? Do you see these? This is not comfortable. I'm not enjoying this. I didn't want to do this. Do you know what I was doing before here? I was asking God, don't make me do this, God. I don't want to do this. I'm not even sure if I like these people. I hate this activity. Is there any other way? I'm suffering right now. I hope you guys feel bad about what I'm doing, because I feel bad doing it, okay? I hope you're grateful, even though I can tell you're not. Because to me, isn't that the best part of sacrificing to show someone your love, is that they know how badly you're sacrificing to show them love, right? And yet Jesus, he's not doing this. And this is why, I have a hard time with that, which is why no one's electing me Jesus. But here's what's crazy. Jesus also says that if you want to go where I'm going, if you want to experience the life that I've experienced, if you want to tap into a fulfillment that feels like you're tasting heaven on earth, then this is what's required of you. Listen to this, Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Jesus says to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. Because if you try and hang on to your life, you'll lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you'll save it. What's Jesus saying? If you want to know what life is really about, it's about love. And the loudest love is the love that is screaming from a cross. It's a love that's demonstrated in the doing of something you don't want to do for somebody that's worth doing it for. And if you really want to follow me and experience what I've experienced, if you want to tap into the kind of fulfilled life that when you see me teach and talk and interact with people, you're like, there's something different about this guy. What is it that he has that we don't? I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm taking up the cross. Every time I come to the crossroads where the relationship can stop here or I can get up on the cross and demonstrate what love really is, every time I choose the cross, there's this deep sense of fulfillment that this is what life is really about. Love. Love in this way. Jesus is saying, like, love people the way they need to be loved, even when you'd prefer not to, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable to you. Because love is a set of actions, not a series of sensations. It looks a certain way. It looks like Jesus. It's a state of mind. It's about what you do, not how you feel. And here's the good news. You don't have to feel good to do good. Because the cross doesn't feel good. So how do we do that? Some of you are sitting to this point where you're like, that's great. Yes, I do. I believe that love is the point of life, that it's the meaning of everything, that what you're saying resonates with me, like the moments that I connect to at the end of my life. I want people to say this about me, but here's the thing, like the cross moments are the tough ones. Like how do you do that like practically? Like when someone deeply hurts you, right? When you trust someone and they fail you yet again, right? When you get to the moment where you realize just how different that other person really is and what's required to like demonstrate love to them, it seems ridiculous to you because you're trying to love them the way that you want to be loved, and you're like, this is the way I want to be loved, I'm loving you, and they're like, I feel nothing, I'm getting nothing from this, I need this other thing, and you're like, that's dumb, why are you like that, that's why, I don't get it, right? Like what about that? What about when hurt and failure and differences push us up on a cross? Like how do you practically navigate that? If you want to know that, you're going to have to come back the next 3 weeks because that's what we're going to be talking about. Moving forward. And we really are. We're going to break down each and every week. And we're going to do this by looking at the life of Jesus. And I'm not going to tell you some things that Jesus said. I'm going to point to some things that Jesus did. We're going to look at moments in his life when he was hurt, when people close to him failed him in painful ways, and when he realized how different the people around him were, what he did in those moments. And what I think is so beautiful about those moments is that you see in these moments that Jesus is very, very human, but he also is God. And here's what I believe about you, is that when you lean into Jesus, when you place your life at the center of his life, when you begin to mimic him and follow him and invite him to be the center of your existence, that even though you are very human, there are moments of godlike transcendence that enter in to your story. That people look at certain moments and they're like, I wouldn't have done it that way personally. Wow, how did they? That's love. And the way Jesus loves is not codependent. It's not him being victimized. It's not him being taken advantage of. It's not him enabling other people, but it is deeply sacrificial. What does that balance look like? We're going to talk about that over the next 3 weeks. And I'm telling you, if you value love and relationships in your life, you need to be here to hear what God has to say to you about how to make love the center, the point, the just one thing that your life is aimed at. Because when you get to the end of your story, that is what you want to be able to say about yourself. Better yet, that's what you want other people to be able to say about you. Because that's the point. Would you bow your heads with me today? I want to pray this into your life on this Super Bowl Sunday. God, I thank you for the lives that you have given us. And God, I thank you that you don't just give us life, but you demonstrate for us the best way to live. God, you show us how to love. God, I'm glad that you don't just tell us how to live, but you show us how to live. That you don't just tell us the right thing to do, you demonstrate it for us. You take on a human body, flesh and blood. You walk in our shoes. And then you show us what it looks like to love sacrificially. And God, I pray that we would grab hold of everything that you want to show us, and we would begin to follow you step by step on little crosses and big ones. God, that whatever ones find their way into our path, that we would pick it up and we would demonstrate love in a way that shows that we have been loved greatly. God, it is because your love for us that we can love others. It's because love has been demonstrated to us that we can demonstrate it to someone else. And God, may you fill our lives with meaning.